Welcome to the People's Guild.
Each week we explore the Splinterlands universe with guests from all across the mythical land of Pretoria.
Join us on our journey as we discuss the evolution of the game, the strategy, the lore, and the exciting path that lies ahead.
To support the People's Guild, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts, and also check us out on PeakD, YouTube, and Twitter.
Send your questions, suggestions, and epic battles in our comments through Twitter or email at thepeoplesguildspl@gmail.com. We'll feature the best in our episodes and maybe airdrop you some prizes.
Thanks for tuning in and enjoy the show.
Welcome back to the People's Guild. Another week, another episode, another great guest. I cannot believe when I reached out to this guy, we were looking back at the last time we hosted him. It's really tough to believe that it's been damn near another year. Last hosted you last December, just before conflicts were meant to go live. Lots happened, lots changed, and here we are back in Q4. Welcome back to the show, Cryptomancer. Wonderful to see you as always, man. How are you?
Thanks. It's good to be here. I'm feeling good. It certainly has been a while. Wow, time really flies. It seems like the older I get, the faster it goes.
That's the truth.
Do you guys remember getting a 5-minute timeout from mom and dad when you guys were kids and it feeling like the end of the world? And now it's like 5 years just passes by in the blink of an eye. Like, what is going on?
Yeah, it makes me think of Christmas. When I was a kid, December just seemed to last forever, waiting for Christmas to come. And now that I'm an adult, it's like, oh my God, it's almost November. Oh shoot, what am I gonna do? Christmas is coming.
All right, man. Well, let's talk about the proposal a little bit. Before we start diving into any specifics, I just want to kind of get your take on, I thought it was a little bit strange that you were kind of put in the crosshairs of the proposal. The real ask was for funds to help the team. You were kind of, in my opinion, unnecessarily dragged into the conversation. Land kind of felt like it was unnecessarily put on the chopping block. It was a little bit of a mess. Now we've got the downhaul in our rearview mirror. We are seeing the proposal in its full form. It looks like it's passing with flying colors. How are you feeling about everything? Do you feel like everything has gone as well as it could have?
Well, I'm feeling pretty good about it now. I think the downhaul really helped to put things in perspective and clarify a lot of things about that proposal. So it was really good that we had a chance to do that and talk to everyone about it. I think when these things come along, there's always a little bit of uncertainty about how the community is going to react and exactly what's going to happen. The best laid plans of mice and men and all that. But overall, I think it's gone very well. And it looks like it's going to be passed, so I'm pleased with that. And you're right, it didn't necessarily have to be me that was on that proposal. It could have been any one of a number of other developers. Basically, this is just a way to get the DAO to help out the company. And it's not really specifically about a particular person or a particular project. It just so happens that I was the one picked for it, and Land was the project that I'm working on. So that's what the proposal was talking about. And as far as why Matt picked me as opposed to someone else, I mean, a number of reasons. Probably because I'm very community facing, more so than a lot of the other devs. Like I'm in Discord a lot, talking to people. People are relatively familiar with me. So I think that made me look like a good choice as opposed to some of the other people that really you don't see very much on Discord. So that probably factored a lot into Matt's thinking. And also, I've been with the company longer than most of the other devs. So I've seen what things were like in the very beginning, and I've seen things evolve over time. I've been around a while.
Were you employee number 3 or 4? Like you had Matt and Aggie, and then was it you or Nate next?
Nate was before me. I think he was
Okay.
there from the very beginning. But I joined very early on in 2020. As far as the dev team, it was just myself, Matt, and there was one other guy helping out at the time, and then that was it. There was nobody else on the dev team. So we've grown quite a lot since then, and even with the reduced team after reductions and whatnot, it's still a much larger team than it was when I first joined.
Yeah, what's our total head count at now, Cryptomancer? Are we still in the 20s somewhere?
I don't know exactly, but 20s sounds about right, somewhere in that ballpark.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting that you kind of recognize that it didn't necessarily have to be Cryptomancer. I have to imagine that part of what factored into that as well is not only are you community facing, but you're the beloved master coder, right? Like all the big important stuff seems to get rolled up through Cryptomancer. So maybe Matt felt like it was a shoe in if we say, hey, Cryptomancer needs some help, we need some help. Um, but water under the bridge at this point. I'm happy that I'm with you. I feel like that down hall was a huge success. I think, kudos to Matt for being as transparent as he was in kind of filling in the community as far as the financials and what 2025 could look like. Obviously he didn't have to do half of that, but he delivered on all of it. So yeah, I think everybody was able to kind of take a big deep breath of fresh air after that down hall and feeling relief, feeling positive.
Yeah, I think it's amazing the Matt is as transparent as he is, especially for a privately held company that's not even publicly traded. Um, I don't think pretty much any other company that I've seen has ever been as transparent as Matt in giving insights into what goes on in the company and what the process is like and some of the financial aspects. So that's one reason that I really like him. He's a straight shooter kind of guy. He tells it like it is. And I really value that myself.
Yeah, I think everybody does in the community. I think part of you being in the crosshairs and the whole thing, I think the wording of the proposal, I think, caught a lot of people by surprise. I think it was just kind of like, oh, interesting. Like, let's do this. Like Jangles was saying before, asking for money for the company for helping in more of a vague way would have probably caused less uh, loud people, I guess, or less drama, maybe. I
Yeah, I
think,
think
yeah,
you're right about that. And
yeah.
these are the sorts of things that we realize in hindsight as we do the. That's why we have this pre-proposal round so that there's time to get feedback and perhaps make some adjustments and clarify things with people. Because you never know exactly how it's going to go or how it's going to be received. It's hard to anticipate these sorts of things ahead of time.
Understood. Yeah, I never thought it was necessary. I mean, it was great to listen to you talk about your story a bit more. That was fascinating. I really enjoyed hearing that part. But I almost felt it was unnecessary for you to need to prove yourself. I think you're of such a high standing in the community, and everyone knows what you do, and you're one of the best out there, best coders out there. That's not in question. So,
Thanks for that.
oh,
I didn't feel any need to prove myself either. Really, I included that mainly for the benefit of people who may be newer to the game. Maybe some people just joined recently and bought some SPS and want to start participating in this whole governance thing, and they might not necessarily know a whole lot about the history or a whole lot about myself or what other devs are involved. So that was mainly for the benefit of those new people that might have been coming in.
I thought it was fascinating. I had no idea you worked in the financial industry for a while, and that also puts a whole perspective on things as well. It makes me think you expressed your passion for the project and that you're doing this because you love it. You jumped in here and said, "Wow, this is something I can do that will really could make a difference, that could have a big impact on the space." And you left the banking world to do that. That says to me I could probably go make more money coding for banks again, but that's way less fun and I'd rather do something way more enjoyable, like creating Splinterlands.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I really enjoyed my time with the banks. And because I find various financial products and instruments to be so interesting, that was a big part of what got me interested in the crypto world, in learning about this brand new way of thinking about finance. But working for the banks was also very stressful. There was a lot of pressure. I had like traders yelling at me that their multi-million dollar trades weren't going to go well because some aspect of the software wasn't exactly up to snuff, and it was just like, man, so much pressure. Um, and I've always been very passionate about gaming, and Splinterlands is just it's night and day compared to the bank. Splinterlands is so exciting. Um, and it's really nice to be able to interact with people one-on-one as well and actually see the effect that what I do has on the game and on the community who enjoy the things that I make. With the big banks, it felt very impersonal. Like I never really knew the effect of the code that I was writing. I didn't get to see so much what the impact, the end result of all that was. And with Splinterlands, I do, and that's part of what makes it so much fun.
Sounds like my job, where if things go well, you don't hear anything. But if something goes wrong, your feet are on the fire.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Cryptomancer, a little bit of a self-serving plug here. Next time you feel like you need to reveal your story, you could just point folks to either episode 29 or episode 78 of the People's Guild. And I think we cover a lot of ground in those two episodes about your backstory.
29. That was the first one I was on. What are we
That
up to
was
now? 118?
something like that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Really come a
today
long
is
ways in
118.
episodes.
Yeah.
Well, 29 is 11 if you add it up. So that's a epic number to be on for your first appearance.
Nice. Well, Cryptomancer, let's talk about land. So obviously you made it pretty clear, Matt reiterated and kind of reinforced this is going to be your primary focus for the foreseeable future. 1.75 is where you've kind of honed in your sights for the next couple of months. I think you mentioned some sort of expectation around Q1, whether that's January or March, for delivery of this code into production, and we see the full kind of fruits of the 1.75 labors. Um, let's talk about land in general, and then kind of zoom in on specifically what you're currently working on with all of the land stuff. And you gave us some great analogies as far as how big of a code base land is, and actually how massive of a project and undertaking in general it is, especially for when we consider that it's primarily one dev who's building this thing out. um in hindsight, would it be easier, or would it have been easier for you to kind of go back and just rework everything versus trying to toggle Farpatrod's code and get familiar with his code, and kind of ramp up to, I think you mentioned that you had spent the previous couple of months really familiarizing yourself with the project and getting ramped up and prepared for this 1.75 push. So what was it, just a kind of a messy code base, or was it just, as somebody who's completely unfamiliar with what coding looks like, is there just a unique kind of signature from Farpatrod that makes it a little bit more difficult to just get ramped up immediately? What does that look like, and would it have been easier to just rewrite from the mastermind of Cryptomancer?
Well, in an ideal world, if I had my way, yeah, I would love to rewrite it from scratch, from the ground up, and do it my own way with my own design methodology. Um, but obviously, that's not something that's realistically possible. We have a large amount of code already, and we have to run with it and build on top of that. We can't afford to take another year or 2 years to redo everything from scratch. And that's
It
also
would
one aspect of being a professional software developer. You don't often get the luxury of rewriting stuff from scratch. Um, you often have to go in and take code that was written by other people and figure out how it works, and then extend it or make it your own and build off of it in some way. Like when I was at the big banks, we had legacy code that had been existing for going back 20, 30 years. Some parts of the bank's most critical systems were still written in an old programming language called Fortran. And it was just, oh man, it was scary stuff to touch.
When was
But
that from? When is Fortran from? Time-wise?
oh gosh, I don't even know what
Like
decade those
90s,
are. Like
90s code or
70s, 80s,
70s? Whoa.
like really, really old stuff.
So were you dealing with sideburns and bell bottoms when you were cleaning that stuff up? Or
It felt like it.
yeah.
But yeah, we didn't have the luxury of rewriting it all. That would have cost the bank millions and millions of dollars to do that. So we had to duct tape it and patch it up and put modern code on top of it and just somehow make sure that it kept working. And you encounter that a lot when you're a professional developer, no matter what company or what industry you work in. Um, you go in and you take an existing code base and then you have to run with it. Totally rewriting something from scratch is an incredible luxury, and you don't often get that opportunity. And so it is with Splinterlands. Now, most of the projects that I've been responsible for in the past, things like collection power, anytime tournaments, brawls, all that stuff, I have had the luxury of creating it from the very beginning and totally designing it myself. And that has been that's another incredible aspect of being with Splinterlands from the beginning, and not having to deal with legacy code bases. So that was really great. Land is very different in that there was already an existing code base when I came in and took it over. And of course, each developer has their own style, their own signatures, if you will. So code written from one person can look very different to code written by someone else. There are overall design methodologies that, as a team, you try to follow in order to maintain consistency. So any big project like Splinterlands will have various rules that the team has agreed to adopt in order to write consistent code. Things like how you should style your code, um, the length of the lines, various ways of calling functions, or various ways of accomplishing certain things. So there's all these different stylistic guidelines and rules that as a team you try to follow. And that makes the code at the nitty-gritty level all look kind of similar. But there can be very big differences when you step back a moment and you look at the overarching larger design patterns and methodologies that are used. There can be a lot of differences in that arena. And when land was started, I think maybe it was over-engineered a little bit. People were trying to focus a little bit too much on looking into the future and considering how it might be used way down the line, once we get to land 2.0. And there were a lot of historical record keeping aspects and other things that were designed into it that, in my opinion, make it feel over engineered. Like there's too much code for what it's supposed to be doing. Um, so it could have been written in a simpler way. And also, some decisions were made which make the land code base structurally very different to a lot of other Splinterlands code. Um, so um, it's hard to describe exactly, but just the way that the code uh, is built and compiled into the project is a bit different than the rest of the game. And in particular, the way it uses the database is very different to the rest of the game. And that's probably the biggest and most challenging aspect of land from my point of view, and what makes it really hard to get new developers up to speed with land. So with
What can-
Splinterlands, a lot of the code is written in JavaScript, and we try to do as much as we can in the JavaScript. And then there's also a database layer. The database layer stores all of the state for the game on the back end. So it stores a lot of information about the cards, about other things like the land plots themselves, the state of everything. It's the game's memory, if you will. And there's a way that you can actually write programs in the database side without using JavaScript code. So you can actually program in this database language, SQL, and you can write entire functions and write business logic for doing things in the database that don't even touch the JavaScript programming side of things. And database programming is very different to traditional computer languages. It's a specialized skill that not many people on the team really have. I think we only have one complete database guru or expert on the team, and he's been focusing a lot behind the scenes on optimizing a lot of the way the database stuff works.
Who is
Some
that?
people, yeah,
Who's the database guy?
Mark is his name. We
Nice.
call him Butcher Block internally. That's
Butcher
his
block.
tag. Yep. He's the go-to guy for databases.
Nice. So
And
from what you were describing, it almost sounds like, I mean, obviously you guys made the decision that it would be better to take what you have and to move forward. Although it sounds like the foundation is making it challenging to move forward. Is part of what you're doing like adjusting that, fixing that in order to correct the foundation in order to make it conform more with the way everything else is coded? Or are you just like, obviously you said we're not scrapping it. It's easier to just fix things.
yeah, going forward, I'm trying to change the style of how land works. I'm trying to simplify the code. Um, and in particular, I want to reduce dependency on the database as much as I can. So with land, the decision was made to put a lot of the business logic for how land works. And by that I mean like figuring out how to apply all the various rules and things that are written in the land white paper. A lot of that business logic was put into the database, which is a design decision that I don't agree with. I would like to see all of the business logic in code and in JavaScript code. And then I want the database to only be used for data retrieval and storage. I don't want business logic in the database
So are you
because
correcting that decision? Like you're basically retroactively fitting these concepts, or
I
are you
only
stuck
want
with
to
it how it
over
is?
time. But for land 1.75, we have to go mostly with what's already there. So
Mhm.
I have to take these database functions, these horrendously complex things that are difficult to maintain because they're written in the database. And I have to get them to work with the new resources, wood, stone, and iron. So for land 1.75, it's more a matter of figuring out how to extend these database functions to work with the new resources. Over time, as we get beyond land 1.75 and closer to the holy grail of land 2.0, I would like to slowly reduce our dependence on these massive database functions. To some extent, there's not really a lot of getting around it because a lot of the core functionality now exists in those functions, and it would be very time consuming to scrap those and rewrite it all in JavaScript. So we have to keep some of it around. But certainly for new stuff that hasn't been implemented yet, like a lot of the new buildings in Land 2.0, um, a lot of the new resources that can be combined and that work a bit differently to the existing resources. As we add on new things, I want to reduce dependence on the database functions and write them in code, which is the way it should have been done from the beginning.
I'm looking
But
at
that's
your
gradual.
1.75 kind of map of scheduled releases and phases, and it looks like what's currently in progress is exactly what you just called out. So altering the database views to handle the new resources, modifying the APIs to match these changes, et cetera, et cetera. Is when you're kind of looking at the full scope of the 1.75 piece of the project, is this kind of the lion's share of the dev work, and then after that, are you kind of smooth sailing from a developmental perspective, and what is kind of the breakdown of division of labor, I guess, when we were looking at your 1.75 kind of scheduled release.
So there's basically three parts that I look at. There's the UI aspect, and that's the code for all the visual stuff that you see on the screens. And then there's the backend JavaScript aspect, which is the server-side code that kind of ties everything together and provides the APIs that the front end calls. And then the third aspect is the database code that I've mentioned. And the database code is by far the bulk of the work and the trickiest aspect. It's the part that takes the longest and the part that goes the slowest because it's the most difficult to reason about and actually code and test. The UI lift for 1.75 is pretty low. Basically, I've added a new filter to the map screen. We're adding new resource icons. There's some new art. But it's basically taking what's already there and showing more data displays for the new resource values. So it's pretty easy to see how the UI has to be extended for that. It's an easy lift. Um, then the backend code is slightly more challenging, and the database code is like 10 times more challenging than anything else. So that's where the bulk of it lies. For Land 2.0, we're going to have to do a lot of redesign work on the UI, though. The current UI is not going to scale very well once we get past Land 1.75. Like, for instance, think about all the new resources that are being added. For Land 1.75, we have 3 new resources. So when you look at the UI, instead of seeing 3 boxes for grain, SPS, and research, you're going to see 6 boxes with wood, stone, and iron added on there. So that extends nicely for Land 1.75. But if you imagine adding 50 more resources to that for Land 2.0, you can see that it's not going to scale very well. We're going to have to think differently about how to represent things on the UI. Like instead of just slapping all those resources on there, maybe we're going to need to turn things into drop-down menus
Drop down menus,
or
yeah.
add some scroll bars so you can scroll through things similar to the way you scroll through packs on the Manowell screen. So right now, Nate's creative team is looking ahead to Land 2.0 and making those sorts of decisions and thinking about how they need to redesign the screens to better show all of that information.
Well, they're doing a great job with that recent couple of recent upgrades. Look fantastic. That last main toolbar on the top with the drop downs. That's definitely tells me they're headed in the right direction with the redesign. And if that's a reflection of how land is going to translate, I take that as a positive direction to be moving in.
Yeah, they've got some sharp guys on that team. I'm really pleased with what they've been turning out these days, and the new toolbar is pretty awesome. And the red dots, we finally got some red dots
Yes.
going on. Yes,
Oh,
long
mine's
last.
working intermittently, but I'm still so happy when I see it. I'm like, yes. Oh, it's like the
It's about
greatest thing
time. I
ever.
agree with you.
3 years, always on in-game notification system. Yes, and it's just a red dot, and it's beautiful. It just
It's
as
finally
it, it just says, oh yeah, I got a brawl to do. That's because they go by so quick. Like we were just talking, I think before you hit record, time is just flying by, and it's just like, oh, I just did my brawls. What do you mean I got to do my brawls again? It's just you always need that little reminder of like you got to go do your brawls. You got a tournament to do. And just that one little dot is so helpful. And we're seeing a lot more quality of life upgrades. Every Tuesday when there's an update, you're just seeing more and more. And you hang out in the UI room, and Lily Fire is amazing at communicating with the team and the community and being this middle person there. And it's just really great to see that type of progress, and to know that she's really just and Royal Eagle, another one, they really have their ear to the ground with the community, and they are listening and making integrating those changes into the updates.
Yes, the team's firing on all cylinders, I think. In particular, I'm impressed with Investigator as well. I'm looking at his daily updates, and Investigator is all over the place. He's taking on all these little quality of life things here and there, and kind of being like a handyman, an everyday handyman. He's got his fingers in all the different pieces that are going on. So it's really cool to see his efforts, basically going and helping out wherever he's needed. And Antioch is focusing on transitioning the battle screen into the tech modernization client, which is a huge deal.
Yes.
So he's in the thick
That
of
was a
that
question.
and making good progress on it. And I'm really excited for that. Once that's done, it'll be like, finally, tech modernization is done.
So is tech going back a little bit? I meant to ask this before when you're talking about with certain things being completely redone and certain things being just corrected as you go. Is tech modernization a complete overhaul of the code, or is it more of a correcting to turn it into the new website?
It's a complete overhaul. It's rebuilding things from scratch. And that's why it's been taking so long. So
Mhm.
when I joined the team, we had a totally different code base, in particular for the front end. So this is more on the front end side than the back end, though it does still have some back end components. But the front end in particular is being rebuilt to use the React client, the React framework in JavaScript. That's what tech modernization uses. And previously, there wasn't any sort of framework. Like Matt kind of cobbled together his own unique custom framework, if you will, and it worked really well. I adapted to it like a fish in water. I loved the way that he did things and got used to it really quickly when I joined the team. But it made it kind of hard to hire other developers because other developers, like nowadays, developers learn to use certain frameworks when they do web work, and they're used to doing things a certain way. And so when you try to hire developers for the team, they'd be like, "Well, what kind of framework are you using?" And we'd be like, "Oh, we don't really have one." And they'd be like, "What?" And
Run away, run away.
yeah, it made it hard to hire good quality people. And so by transitioning to the React framework, which is a modern framework that a lot of JavaScript developers are familiar with, it makes it easier to attract talent and it makes it easier to maintain because everyone kind of knows like, well, this is how it works. You don't have to go in and figure out a custom framework.
Well, from
Um,
another angle, is that custom framework, was it like you said you really liked it? Was that something that could have evolved into its own complete new language? Like this have been Yaba, like Java or something, where you're like, oh, we're using Yaba, and in 10 years, everyone knows what that is, and you have people who specialize in that.
It could well have been. And
Yeah.
if I was in charge of overall architectural decisions, that might have been the way that I would have directed
Oh.
things to go, because I really like the way that he did it. I have kind of this now I have the kind of this love-hate relationship with frameworks myself. Frameworks are nice, but they force you to do things in a certain way and give less flexibility for out-of-the-box thinking, if you will.
Mm.
So once you're using a framework, you have to do things in a way that's compatible with that framework.
You're limited
Not
to that
suddenly
framework. You're
ignore the framework.
restricted.
Right,
Yeah.
you're locked into that framework. You need a new UI widget. Well, you better hope the UI widget plays nice with this framework. You want to do something that's completely different and not totally unique and different from anything else that exists out there. Well, good luck with it because it'll be hard to do in a framework. And like when I was at Goldman Sachs, they developed their own custom in-house framework for working with the database. So they basically created their own special database system from scratch that's tailor-made for high frequency trading and for doing the kinds of very specific things that they need to do for their business. And it's having that custom internal framework is one of the things that gave them an edge over their competitors and allowed them to make certain market predictions with greater accuracy than their competitors. But it made it harder for Goldman to hire people, and it made it take longer for their devs to get familiar with how this framework works. Um, so there are trade-offs in whichever way you look at it. Having a custom framework might give you certain benefits, but there are also drawbacks when you go to wanting to expand the team, and it adds additional overhead for getting people up to speed and whatnot.
Is that sort of approach, the custom framework versus embracing something like the React framework? Is there something to be said for, if Splinterlands had opted to pursue and maintain the Yaba framework, is it pretty standard practice to kind of keep that stuff proprietary and in-house, or is it completely possible for what Jimmy suggested, where we take the Yaba framework and we start to advertise that this is an alternative way of doing things?
I mean, it's certainly possible that you could do that. You can look at open sourcing certain things or making it a selling point of the company. GS certainly made their custom database framework a selling point. Like they would say, join the company and you get to work with this special thing that nobody else has. And that was kind of cool. But then there's a flip side as well. Some people look at that and say, well, if I join the company and I'm locked into using this thing, it's going to dead end my career because I won't be able to learn about any other modern things that come along. And if I ever leave the company and try to get hired somewhere else, it's not going to look great on my resume because I won't have the skill set that other companies are looking for any longer. So there are flip sides to it. Um, I think if I was in charge of it myself, I would have wanted to keep it in-house and not really advertise it so much to the rest of the world.
Oh.
Hmm.
I'm kind of leaning towards that too. That seems like it was a perfect opportunity to just have this completely unique structure, especially that we're doing a completely unique thing with, right?
Yeah, and it worked really well in the
Yeah,
beginning. And it probably would have continued to work well if there were just a couple people on the team. But
right.
as we grew, I wasn't the one overall in charge of architecture decisions. Someone else made those calls. And it was probably the right call to make. We needed to bring on more devs to the team, and needed to make it easier to work with the code base. And I think tech modernization does that. It also makes it a lot easier for things to be mobile responsive. With the old custom framework, mobile compatibility was really difficult. Uh, with React, you get a lot of that functionality kind of out of the box. Um, you do still have to do some additional coding. Like sometimes you have to make a mobile version of a particular layout in addition to the desktop version. So don't get me wrong, you don't get it completely for free, but it makes it a lot easier to make things that play nice on different screen sizes. So that's another benefit of using React.
I'm hearing from people that the I don't use mobile myself. I do everything on my PC, but I'm hearing a lot of positive things about the mobile experience at this point, which is obviously one of the most essential elements for the success and mass adoption is getting that mobile experience smooth, accessible, and enjoyable.
Yes, you could say that's part of the NPE that everybody loves talking about. So having tech modernization close to complete is another step along that path to having a great NPE, and a very big important step in my opinion.
That's huge. I mean, so it seems like this battles is the last part to move over to tech modernization. How close are we to that being actually finished? Do you know?
I think it's getting fairly close. I mean, Antioch has been working on it for quite a while already behind the scenes. I think it's getting ready to go into internal testing, and that process, of course, is likely to take quite a long time. So the release is definitely not imminent. I don't think you're going to be seeing it in the ultra short term, um, but it is coming, and we're getting closer to the end of it than the beginning of it. And it's going to be really great because for so long, the battle screen has been kind of static and unchanging. It's one of the most important parts of the game, but it's also the part that has been touched the least because we didn't want to do anything with it before it was ported over to tech modernization. You don't want to have to do the work twice on these things. But after the tech modernization port is complete, then we can finally start evolving the battle screen and doing a bunch of cool stuff with it. Um, I mean, you probably remember seeing the Battles 2.0 vision during Splinterfest, right? We can
I
finally
do.
start moving towards something more like that.
Now you're talking about the actual watching a battle. That's the battle
Yes,
screen. What
actually
about,
watching the battles.
okay, so that's different than like choosing your team.
Right, the choosing your
Okay.
team port has already been ported to tech modernization, and we're already starting to see some various little tweaks and improvements to that as well.
Yes, yes, I've noticed those for sure. For sure.
Yeah, so that was kind of my next question there, Cryptomancer. When are we going to immediately feel an impact when the battle screen tech modernization is complete, or on the surface it's going to kind of maintain what we're accustomed to, but it is going to allow for, those aesthetic adjustments to be much easier to have moving forward.
I think on the desktop side, you're not going to see a real big visual impact right out of the way. It's being ported to kind of maintain the existing style of the old screen, but it will then allow the possibility of starting to evolve it from that point forward. I do think you will see a lot more impact on mobile devices. Um, you're going to see things looking much better on mobile right out of the gate. Um, I can't say in exactly what ways. I don't play it on mobile myself, so I'm not familiar with the way it works right now or the way it looks. But I think Antioch, as he goes along, has been really being mindful of the mobile impact and making sure it looks good on small devices. So you will see an impact there right out of the gate.
Well, Rogue is one of the guys that immediately jumps to my mind as he is 99% mobile. And that's what really drove him away was, he took a 6, 7, 8 month hiatus from the game just because the mobile experience was so dismal. But with the recent updates, he says you don't have to turn when traditionally, and I had tried to, sneak some tournaments in while I was working or something like that on my phone. It's been a while since I've had to do that. But traditionally, you always had to turn your phone into landscape mode to manage anything. And according to what I've heard from Rogue, you can keep your phone in profile until the actual battle screen, which is just a huge quality of life upgrade. Uh, and I think it was Eagle during the down hall that shared tentative screenshots of what a profile screen battle could look like. Um, yeah, so
Yeah,
I think everybody's got to be excited for what's to come with these changes.
yeah, I'm pretty sure the tech modernization port is going to fix that. And you're right. We really need a good, solid mobile experience. I know some people have been driven away due to that, and I think it's really unfortunate that that had to happen. So we're definitely focused in that area, and I think it needs to be in place before we can really do a big marketing push because a lot of people do play that way. We need to cater to more than just the desktop crowd here for sure.
Yeah, I've always been a believer that having a almost a completely different thing that is a mobile game, like the game of Splinterlands itself is so much fun to play, and it really hits a demographic. I really think it could grab that absolutely enormous Magic the Gathering demographic, who recently saw a mass upset in Exodus as well. And I almost always thought that a an app store version of the game that's free to play. You pay like $4 or $10 and you buy it and you're not earning anything. It's not blockchain. You're just playing the game Splinterlands would be an incredibly effective way to actually drive people to the Web3 crypto version of the game. Is that just an insane thought, or is that something that if we had funds and time could actually be a way to market the game and to attract people?
And that's not an insane thought at all. I think that's actually a really good idea and definitely makes sense. It also makes a lot of sense to me to have a native mobile app, like something that's actually designed from the ground up for mobile and is not just like a mobile version of a web page showing on a browser
Hmm.
screen. You can do a lot more stuff with native apps than you can do simply with something that wraps around a web page.
Hmm.
But to do something like that, we basically have to put out a whole different version of the game, and it's simply not something that we're really capable of with our limited team right now. We used to have an actual mobile app and not just a wrapped website. I think I don't know a lot of the specifics of it. I wasn't involved with that, but I think it was Double Coconut that was originally working on that, like the same people that are doing Soulkeep now. And it just didn't really prove viable in the long run to keep supporting that and having it done that way. Um,
Yeah. I almost think that could be considered a part of a marketing budget if it's not like insanely expensive to make something like that. And since you're not doing all the actual, asset transfer and earning glints and SPS every single battle, it seems like it would be a lot simpler to actually make a game that works that way without all that other back end stuff going on.
and it's funny you should mention that. There was a DAO proposal once a while ago. There was some third-party community dev that actually was producing his own mobile app for Splinterlands, and it would simply hook into the Splinterlands APIs. And he produced some demo screens, like some proof of concept stuff, and it looked really, really good. And I think he put out a DAO proposal to get funding from the DAO to complete the app. And it was a relatively low cost ask. Like I don't remember exactly what it was, like 10 or $20,000 or something like that. But the DAO shot it down. They said, nope, we're not giving out money to third party stuff. And I thought that was a bit unfortunate. I wish that guy had stuck around and tried to push his case a little harder, but he kind of vanished after that. So
I
it
don't remember
certainly is.
that proposal. Do you happen to remember who the dev was?
I don't remember. No, there was
It
some
was a
chatter. You might want to ask Femi Sapiens. He might remember. I'm not sure. There was
Hmm.
some guy in Discord that was talking about it a while back, but I don't really remember the details.
it was a variation of the game, right? It wasn't like the same thing. Um, I think I remember that vaguely. It looked different, right? It almost had like a wooden background or something crazy like that.
Yeah, I don't really
I
remember
feel
this
like
one.
Yeah.
Jimmy. I feel like you're remembering Wolf's game.
There was Wolf's thing
Oh,
was
yes, yes.
Splinter
I think that
Royale.
is. I
yeah.
think
I'm
that,
not talking about
yes.
Splinter Royale. That was
Yeah,
a second.
that was purely rewards. That wasn't dev. He was asking for SPS rewards for the game, not for
Yeah.
No, no,
dev
Splinter Royale
sponsorship.
was like the boss fights thing, right? Or was
No,
that something else?
that's
That was another one.
Splinter Forge. Is that right?
That Splinter Forge,
Splinter
yeah.
Yes,
Okay,
Forge.
yes.
yes.
That
Yep,
was the
that was
boss
a
fight
different
thing.
one. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's been a couple. And
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
considering
I
that's
supported Splinter Royale as well. I thought Wolf's project was really cool. And
hmm
I'm a bit sad to see that he moved blockchains after that. I really thought he had a neat idea going, and I supported his proposal.
Yeah, I mean, something that I remember going back in old AMAs when they were called that, how it was always a part of the vision was to allow, to encourage third parties to um, grow off of Splinterlands, to create things that are all based off of Splinterlands and to branch out.
Yes. Maybe we'll get there someday. I think a lot of the DAO's hesitation in funding efforts like that is that people just don't want to see the DAO completely drain its funds. And you already see the DAO's resources are starting to get stretched a little thin, especially now that we have the proposal to fund me and the DAO's paying PJ's team as well for the validators. So it's important that the DAO kind of generate its own revenue sources and build up its stockpiles a bit now that we have these various funding proposals that are in effect or about to go in effect. As the DAO replenishes its coffers and starts to have more headroom, if you will, I do hope that it will consider funding some more community efforts because we have some really talented devs in the community and I really want them to have their chance to shine.
Well, in hindsight, the denial of proposals like what you're talking about, uh, it was the right call. Had we opted to fund those, I don't know if we'd still be in the same position to help the team out as significantly as we're able to with the current proposal. So,
Yes, and
for
that's
as
a
many
good point.
proposals as we may have gotten wrong as a community, I feel like, perhaps they happened for a reason the way that they did. And I we hosted Wolf a couple of episodes ago, and we were talking about, what if uh something like moon carts had actually been like dragon racing with Splinterlands characters, and your racer could be somebody like Selenius Guy or Quick the Devious or something like that, had we kind of pursued these Splinterland asset and expanding the lore. And yeah, just it was some really cool food for thought, and maybe we can get back to that at some point down the road. Because I feel like there's always an appetite for more Splinterlands stuff. That seems to be, the
Yes,
crowning jewel of what we've
absolutely.
got here.
Absolutely. I mean, how awesome would it have been to do that from the beginning, to have moon carts utilize Splinterland's assets? Or the example that I like to go back to is Soulkeep. Oh my gosh, so many missed opportunities with Soulkeep. It should have been Splinterland's tower defense. It should have used Splinterland's characters. Imagine
Hmm.
if your towers are defending against an incoming army of Matt Clark's flesh golems. Or if
Yes.
you got the Lord of
Lord
Darkness
of
as a
Darkness walking down there, cracking
character.
his whip.
Yeah, cracking his
Yeah,
whip.
absolutely.
It should have been Splinterland's characters. That would have made it so much more engaging and so much more interesting and so much more a cool part of the Splinterlands ecosystem.
So when that was first developed, that was under the Splinterlands umbrella, right? And that was just right back in the day when they first started Soulkeep. That was when it was still part of the company.
It was, I believe it was Hardpoint's brainchild to begin with. And I was so excited about the idea because I really thought that was what we were going to do. For a long time, I had been thinking it would be so cool if we had a tower defense game using Splinterlands assets.
I thought it
So
was going to
I
be the
thought
same
that's what we
too.
were going to do, but
Yeah.
we didn't. And
What
I
happened? Like, how did that not happen?
I don't know. I was never involved with Soulkeep. That was a totally different team. I had no visibility into what was going on
I'm
there.
picturing like a
Um,
hundred little goblin sorcerers from the alpha packs being those little guys that are cruising around, just like that'd be
Yeah, and the
so
maps
cool.
could have been places in Pretoria, so it could have tied into
Hmm.
the Splinterlands lore, and there could have been good chances for world building and story building there with the lore guys. And also, the original vision was instead of this tournament style of play that we have now, it was supposed to be a lot more like PvE. Like you'd have changing conditions for battles, randomized maps, randomized enemies. So you never play the same exact map twice. It's always randomized. Um, and then based on how it would be like an infinite wave progression thing, and based on how far you get, that would dictate your reward share.
Hmm.
So you'd still be competing against other people in a sense that there'd be a reward pool, and the relative reward shares of different people would dictate the prizes. But you'd be playing more against a randomized environment. You wouldn't have all the problems that we see with the leaderboard stuff. I mean, when this leaderboard thing came along, I looked at it. I was like instantly, oh my God, this is not, this is gonna, oh my God. And oh, it just makes me want to tear my hair out.
Yeah, well,
So
maybe one
many,
day, man. I still believe that we have the potential to do everything we wanted to and become a world-class game studio that leads Web3. I still think that's on the table, and ultimately believe that success in that area is within our grasp. And then
yeah,
at that point, we can do Soul Keep, Splinterland Soul Keep, and have flesh golems and all these little awesome creatures walking around.
yeah. I mean, I don't want to throw Soulkeep under the bus. So I bought a huge number of packs myself. I was one of the top pack purchasers because I was so excited about the original idea. So I really hope that they do manage to get over these initial teething bumps, and I think they're doing a good job of starting to listen to people now. And there have been some AMAs with Double Coconut, and I do believe that they really want to make a good game and fix some of these things that have come up with it. And we just need to give them time to do that. And some goodwill, and hopefully in another year or so, it'll be a much better product.
How many packs did you buy? If you don't mind sharing. I mean, we could look it up on the blockchain, but how many packs did you buy?
I don't remember the exact number, but I think it was something like over 5,000.
Well, that must have given you a good amount of SPS during the airdrop period.
It did.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was that.
Yeah.
I don't think it totally made up for the initial purchase, but at least it was something.
Well, it would if SPS is back to like 3 or 4 cents, right? Then it might. So
Yeah.
it will, one day it will make up for the initial purchase. I believe that.
Yep, I'm still holding those packs. I have not dumped them. I still believe that it has potential. Uh, we just need to get past this initial teething phase.
So I had
Cryptomancer,
a
I want to
question.
shift gears with you a little bit
Sure.
here.
Yeah.
So, maybe 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, something like that, there was a little bit of a snafu with the last airdrop, the Nidhogger card. It was triggered prematurely. Um, People were receiving cards, and I think Vugtis said he pulled something like 4 gold foils, and they were they were very quickly kind of disintegrated within his grasp, sort of thing. Um, and subsequently, I saw some people calling into question the lack of smart contracts, and the cards don't actually exist as NFTs on Hive. And I've kind of subsequently done some research, and that's not something that's currently possible within Hive. Um, at least that's my understanding. Is there? I kind of want to get your take on, because we I think most folks, the average folk, probably looks at cards as an NFT, but the reality is it's is it really? So I'd love to get your perspective on that snafu. Obviously I'm not asking you to throw anybody under the bus, but does that call into question and raise any concern for you as far as the security of folks' assets and cards?
All right, so regarding that particular snafu, there's not much that I really want to say publicly about that. It was due to a mistake that happened internally, and I don't think I really want to go into any more detail there. Um, I will say that it was caught very quickly, and the team did a really good job of rolling back the effects of that and doing some damage control there. So kudos to the team for catching that quickly and rolling it back. So in the end, no harm done there. And I think we understand what happened, and we'll be careful not to let it happen again. Um, it is a risk in having the game centralized to a certain extent. So yeah, things like that can happen due to human error and whatnot. It's certainly a risk. And there have been other incidents in the past that are somewhat similar. Um, Now, we want to decentralize the game as much as possible, and that's what the validators are. They're a big step forward in decentralization, but the validators don't decentralize everything. It only decentralizes some of the aspects that are related to SPS transactions. Um, it it doesn't decentralize all the other game operations. So regarding the cards, you are right. They are not true NFTs in the sense that I think a lot of people think of them. They exist in a centralized database that's operated by the company, but they can be moved to other blockchains. So, there's the gateway to Wax. So if you send a card to Wax, then it does become a true NFT on the Wax blockchain, and then you can send it back into the Splinterlands game. And technically, it's possible for them to exist on the Hive blockchain as well through Hive Engine. So Hive Engine has an NFT smart contract, which I created. I designed and wrote the NFT protocol for Agrode, and it's possible that we could have a gateway that functions similarly to the Wax gateway that would move the Splinterlands cards onto the Hive Engine platform, and then they would exist as true NFTs on that platform. Now, before everyone gets all upset and says, "Oh no, no NFTs, that's a scam, no." Um, so we do have that interoperability between blockchains, and also in the future, we would like to work towards an ultimate decentralized vision. I mentioned the validators is kind of the first step in that process. I think what Yaba told me a long time ago, one of his ultimate visions is to see everybody running game servers in a similar way to those validator nodes. So instead of one centralized copy of the database that Splinterlands currently runs, you would have everybody running their own copies of the database with their own Splinterlands nodes, if you will. And those nodes would have a consensus algorithm like a blockchain, which would keep all of the databases in sync so that everybody has the same state. So if you query the API for one particular node and you say, give me the information on this card, and then you query somebody else's API and you say, give me the information on this card, you will get the same data back because everyone's database will be in the same state. And at that point, you're basically running a blockchain. That's what a blockchain is. It's a collection of these network nodes that exist all over the world that maintain the same internal state of the chain. And the validators will be kind of like a blockchain for SPS. Ultimately, what we would like is for Splinterlands itself to be completely decentralized in the same way. So all the operations that you do in the game would all be ran on all these different community nodes, and they'd all be maintaining the same consistent state. And at that point, you would have what I think a lot of people think of when they think of an NFT. Um, and getting to that is kind of like a holy grail. It will be immensely difficult and take many, many, many years. But that's kind of like the end vision, I think, for Yabatmat. And at that point, it wouldn't matter if Splinterlands, the company, existed or not, because there would be no more centralized servers. The game itself would exist as a distributed network all around the world, and you couldn't take down the game by taking down any one particular server. That is the holy grail of decentralization. And I think no Web3 games, sorry, no Web3 games have ever managed to reach that state. It's a hypothetical right now. You can talk about decentralization all you want, but nothing at this point, no games are perfectly decentralized. There is always some centralized aspect, usually relating to the web hosting and running of the game code. Parts of it are decentralized. Splinterlands is Web3 in the sense that we utilize the blockchain for various things, like recording the game transactions and managing the various crypto tokens that are part of the game. No, it's not completely decentralized, but nothing is. So what we want to do is work towards that holy grail future state of perfect decentralization. It's a process. It's not something that we're at right now. Does that all kind of make sense?
I think so. I will definitely have to go circle back and re-listen to that and properly digest it. But I think that's yeah, you covered a lot of ground there, Cryptomancer. So is on a little bit of a tangent note, is my understanding is there's a project on Hive, um, that may be a couple of years in the works, VSC Virtual Smart Chain. Is that in any way, shape, or form going to assist in moving towards this grand vision?
Um, VSC is not something that I know a lot about. I have not really been following their project too closely. Um, I think it could provide some competition for Hive Engine once it really gets ramped up, as it will be kind of an alternative smart contracts platform that could do a lot of the same things that Hive Engine does. So from that point of view, it's an interesting thing to keep an eye on. I'm not really sure what its impact will be on Splinterlands, and since I don't know much about it, I can't really comment much further than that on it.
Okay, so not in the foreseeable future will it help propel us towards that decentralized dream.
Yeah, it's not something that's on our immediate radar, and I think it's too early to tell what ways it might impact things.
I had a question. I don't know, kind of bringing it back to something we were talking about earlier. You just said, Holy Grail, that word came up, and that reminded me of when you referred to Land 2.0 as the Holy Grail. Is Land 2.0 where we actually start to make NFTs?
Yes, Land 2.0 is where we'll actually start producing those item and spell cards. And you see now that we already have this tactics phase added to battle, where you can make some choices before the battle plays out about which summoner tactics to apply. That's kind of an early attempt to imagine how we're going to be doing these item and spell cards. So you can imagine that they will be applied in a similar manner to the tactics. There will be a screen like that where you pick which item and spell card you want to use prior to the battle starting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, very much so.
Hmm.
That's cool to know that that's what 2.0 actually comes down to. Um, Also going back to something we were kind of mentioned before, you had mentioned new player experience. You probably know that I was one of the people who, when this proposal came out, it kind of triggered questions because it was just kind of like, boom, drop this proposal, and everyone's like speculating and like, what's going on? And I was one of the people saying, well, if we are in, real survival mode, if funding is really dire and it comes down to we need to be generating money for the company, more than anything else right now. Obviously, the main way we do that is to attract players and to sell things like packs and just sell things through the shop that generate revenue for the company. Um, how Okay, and one of the things I was also thinking was that, land is less important for attracting new players than for other types of things. We now have actual data showing, Royal Eagle has been working with real new players and seeing that guilds, interaction with guilds really helps new players stick. It's something that increases the sticking point tremendously. Um, how important is do you think land compared to other things, and how your involvement, like would it be completely out of the question, completely crazy, or completely not even worth your time to focus on things like guilds and before land? For example, I don't think we can do tactics in guild brawls yet. Just those little things that would kind of make the guild experience better. I know guild buildings or something you've been talking about. Is that something where, like, if you were to dabble for a few months and really tidy up guilds, especially since you created the code base and you're familiar with it, would there be any benefit to that? Or would that just be a complete waste of time?
So yeah, it would not be a complete waste of time. Guilds, there's a lot of more that we want to do with it, and we have some pretty good plans drawn up for a guild overhaul for new buildings that would do different things, and you'd be able to stake cards on your buildings, and we wanted to provide something for guilds to do with all of their guild power once they've maxed out all of the buildings. Um, so that it's not just sitting there. And it was unfortunate that we didn't really have time to go through with those plans. Implementing the guild power system was kind of the first step in that overhaul, and I was happy that I got to do that much. At the time, I was expecting that I would just move into the rest of the guild overhaul right after guild power, but then that didn't end up being a priority anymore. So I do definitely want to get back to guilds at some point, whether it's me or someone else on the team that does. Um, but I think it's important that we keep moving ahead on land. And even if we can only have one person on land at a time, there needs to be someone always on land pushing it ahead. And right now, that someone is me. And a lot of people look at land and they think, not so important, it can wait. But it's been waiting for a long time. And now that we have the first phase of land out, people are already starting to accumulate all of this grain and all of this research, and those numbers are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger day by day. And the longer we wait to get more pieces of land out, the harder it's going to be to balance the land economy and make sure there are enough sinks to absorb the massive numbers of resources that people have already been farming.
Do you think that there's going to be the same situation if we release land in these phases? And we have iron or ore and wood and stone next. Are we going to see the same situation as we did with grain and research, where we're just going to be amassing mass amounts of these resources? Or is there a mechanism in there where we're going to be actually consuming these?
It takes so long to get each of these phases out, and then what are you going to do?
Right, right. That's the big question people have. It's like, are we just kicking the can down the road and we're going to have the same problem with more resource tokens?
Yeah. So the thing that immediately comes to my mind when you mention that is the building in a box. The building in a box is supposed to give you all the resources you need to produce a level 1 building. And just constructing a level 1 building was supposed to take a considerable amount of resources. Thus why building in a box would be a great benefit. But if people have time to stockpile so much of these resources before we even get to the point where you can construct these buildings, then is building in a box really going to be that impactful? So that's one thing that we are thinking about. And my answer to that would be we need sinks for the new resources from the beginning, not 6 months down the line. And that is why with land 1.75, immediately there will be a use for woodstone and iron. You're going to need to provide woodstone and iron as inputs to producing SPS and research. So that will immediately be a sink and a use for those new resources and should hopefully keep them from accumulating a great deal, unless you happen to be someone that doesn't care about SPS and research. We'll also say that land is kind of like, oh, it's a whale's game. I'm not a whale. I don't need to care about it. And I don't think that's true either, because the items and the spells that are going to be the end result of land will have a huge transformative effect on ranked battles, which is the main gameplay mode. And you might not necessarily be a whale that's producing the items and spells, but if you're not, you're probably going to be a consumer that's using the items and spells. And I would think everybody would want those in the game sooner rather than later, because it's going to be such a big, interesting tactical change for the ranked battles. It's
Well,
not just a whales game. Land is going to affect everybody.
Well, on that point, it was always kind of envisioned that a player can have a plot or two plots, and you're going to be making whatever resource that plot generates, and you're going to be able to sell that into the ecosystem. And do you see that as a possible reality for a guy to have one or two plots, and with the cost of what it takes to stake cards and to put the DEC on there and to get the higher production cards, is it going to be dare I use the word profitable for a guy with one or two plots to fully participate in land and to see some fruit from that participation with just a handful of plots or a single plot?
I want it to be, and I will be very sad if it doesn't end up being that way.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, I want the people that have just 2 or 3 plots, I want them to feel proud of having that land and to feel excited about it, just like the whales that may have hundreds. I want there to be some benefit for those people. And I think once the entire land ecosystem is in place, there will be lots of room for people to discover certain niches within that that they can take advantage of, that's fit for their situation. So even the whales are not going to be able to produce everything. The supply chain for land is so big, and goes through so many steps to produce the finished items and the spells, that even if you own an entire region, you're not going to be able to produce all the stuff that you need. You're going to have to trade some of your resources that are plentiful for some of the things that you don't have a lot of. Just like a real world business. I mean, in a real world business, like let's say you're a book manufacturer, a book publisher, say you're publishing these books. You probably don't own the companies that produce the paper that goes into the books. You probably don't own the companies that produce the ink that goes on that paper. There's a supply chain. You purchase your ink and your paper from the companies that do make those things, and then you put it together and you make a finished book. So land is designed to mimic the real world in that aspect. There is a supply chain, and different people may specialize in different parts of that supply chain. Some people may specialize in producing the final item in the spell cards. Some people may specialize in producing some of the resources that go into another part of the supply chain. Like you may specialize purely on grain production, let's say. Like maybe you build a whole bunch of storage silos and you just churn out that grain because you know that the people that produce the items and the spells aren't going to have a lot of grain production themselves, so they're going to need to buy their grain from you. So I think for people that have only a few plots, they will have a chance to pick one thing that they really want to specialize in that's suited for the strengths of their plots, and then get really, really good at occupying that one niche and making profits by selling their resources to other parts of the supply chain. That's how I envision it working.
Yeah, that's in line with what we've been, the plan the whole time seems to have been that. So
Yep. And it'll
yeah.
take a while to get there, but as more and more pieces of the land economy get added, we'll get hopefully closer and closer to that point. Like just with land 1.75, you're going to see a lot more specialization starting to happen because I'll bet you that most people right now are not going to be self-sufficient in grain anymore once land 1.75 comes out. Because a lot of the grain plots that you probably have are probably on plots that can't produce grain once we add that aspect of it in. So, like, I know myself right now, I produce a ton of extra grain and I just throw it in the liquidity pool. But once land 1.75 hits, my grain production is probably going to be cut in half or maybe even greater than half. And suddenly I'm not going to have enough. So, I'm going to need to figure out what to do. So, I think right away we're going to start to see the LPs being utilized a lot more. And if I were you, um, I'd be stockpiling that grain now because it's going to be a lot harder to get, and we're probably going to be seeing people having to go to those LPs and purchase grain.
Cryptomancer, so you've got, I believe, in excess of 3,000 plots, 3 regions. Is that right?
Yes, about 3,000 plots. I traded a few of them away, but that's about how many I've got.
And how many do you have up and operational at this point?
30%. So I've got
30%.
about 2 full regions that I'm not utilizing. I have my production spread out across all 3 regions. I basically cherry picked the best plots from all 3 of them, but the vast majority of my common plots are not being used at all right now.
Are you clearing slowly at least? Like, do you have a couple of little cards on there clearing?
I should.
Oh yeah, I did
Yeah,
that for a while. Like just even, because we're going back a year now where you could be like, I'm throw a rare beta on a plot, and it's gonna take like 4 months to clear that plot. But all of a sudden, 4 months goes by.
yeah, I
You
should be
know?
doing that, but I've been lazy about setting it all up. I need to get on top of that.
Is there, so we've heard kind of a couple of times, initially there was the thought that land surfing would kind of solve, exactly what you're alluding to, Cryptomancer, and that you've got 2,000 plus that are just kind of sitting idly by, and land surfing seemed like a pretty elegant, simple solution to allow for folks to come in and benefit while you benefit from lending out these lands. That my understanding is that land surfing has been completely squashed at this point, and we're kind of proceeding without that being part of the longer term vision for land. Is there something that you guys have discussed internally kind of make up for the removal of land surfing. Maybe you can rent out your plots for folks to actively participate in clearing and or uh working said land.
Yeah, land surfing is one of those things that sounded like a great idea at the time. It looked really good on paper, and we thought that it could be developed kind of parallel to land itself, in a way that wouldn't require a lot of additional effort. But that ended up not being the case. It's one of those ideas that once we really got into it, it turned out not to be so workable after all. And there would have been lots of implementation concerns with it and lots of stuff that we would have had to figure out to make it actually work well with Land 2.0. So it was dropped. Um, I would still like renting land plots to be a thing. That's something that's still on the drawing board and still under consideration and has not been completely ruled out yet. So you may see renting land plots become a thing at some point. I don't know what that would actually look like. We have not actively designed it yet. It's still just an idea that's being tossed around. But I have
Sounds
some hope that
tricky.
we may see that eventually.
Sounds like it would be tricky with because you got buildings to upgrade that someone has to pay for. Is it the renter or the person who owns the land that pays for that? And a lot of
Yeah.
decisions to be made there.
In regards to that, I'd continue the real life analogies. Like if you rent a house in real life, it's the landlord's responsibility to build the house and maintain it. You, as the renter, cannot suddenly add a new room to the house. If something broke in the house, you'd ask your landlord to fix it.
Yeah. And then
So,
as you upgrade, the rent goes up also.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I imagine land would work somewhat the same way. If you rented a land plot, you'd be able to use whatever buildings are on the land, but it would still be the landowner's responsibility to upgrade those buildings and whatnot. And there'd be some kind of rent or upkeep. Like maybe you could agree to rent the land in exchange for um, mm, giving the owner a certain percentage of the resources that it produces, or maybe it'd be some amount of DEC that you have to pay, just like seasonal rentals of cards. I don't know. We'd work something out, but I imagine it working somewhat similar to real life land rentals.
Cool. Well, I think everybody's got to feel excited and encouraged that you've said for as long as we've talked to you, Cryptomancer, that land was kind of the prize jewel in terms of what you wanted to be able to develop. And I think everybody who knows anything about what's been happening in Splinterlands over the years has got to feel excited and encouraged that it is finally within your purview and that you are the master overseer of all things land for the foreseeable future. Um,
Yes, I wanted to get to this point myself for a long time. I've wanted to be the land guy since the beginning, and I was disappointed that I had to work on the Modern and Wild project instead of being involved in the initial designs for land. And all right, I like to complain about the land code base, yeah, and grumble about it, okay, but ultimately I'm pleased as punch to be working on land and carrying that forward. And I grew up playing the Civilization games. I love Civilization. It's one of my favorite series of PC games, and I love the 4X strategy type games. And that's what really kind of attracted me to land in the first place. And the idea of getting a chance to develop a kind of a 4X system like that within the Splinterlands is just, uh, I just leaped at the chance. It's an amazing thing. Nobody was more excited than me when the first land presale post came out. I can tell you that.
awesome, man. Well, I think yeah, well, I'll be kind of waiting with bated breath for that 1.75 to make waves and come out. I know you're not in a position to offer any dates or promises, but yeah, everybody's excited. I'm actually starting to stockpile some DEC to eventually get my plots up and going again. I still got my monsters, but I ultimately opted a couple of months ago to just pull my DEC off and made a big move into SPS at that point in time. And in hindsight, it worked out to be pretty timely because it was when SPS was sub half a penny. So
Oh,
all
nice.
said and done, I think it worked out, but now I've got to save my DEC again.
Gonna say those high DEC staking costs are kind of one of the biggest limiting factors right now in land utilization. Um, and yeah, people say, ah, it's too high, whatever. Um, to that, I would say, again, it's just like real life. You want to use some land, or you gotta save, um, build up to it, gradually increase it over time. So we don't want people to just be able to instantly like get all the land stuff that they need. We want it to be a gradual process over time that may take a number of years to really build up. Just like gladiators, same thing. People say, oh, getting gladiators takes forever. Yeah, it's supposed to. That's the way it works.
And it's important to realize that you say this with 3,000 plots, and to even further that you've got 40% utilization at this point, and you're happy as a
30%.
clam, it seems, with
30.
30%. Ah, I keep overselling your land utilization there, Mancer.
Yes, I
So
myself expect many years on that.
cool. Well, I want to echo what Jimmy said earlier. On the heels of the initial post from Yaba around the proposal, um, I kind of raised the question: is land the right place for us to be, placing our bets for what's going to move the needle for the company? And my immediate kind of knee jerk reaction was, why is that even a question when we know that this is obviously without the context of the financials and what our current runway looks like, our expenditures, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and with the added context of guilds really moves the needle for new players to kind of feel at home. They stick at a much greater degree when they immediately get hopped into a guild, and can develop some of those interactions, those relationships, develop some friendships with some buddies in guilds and that sort of thing. So that was my knee jerk reaction is, why are we considering continuing to focus on land when we know that something like guilds continues to move the needle? Obviously, I think that question has mostly been answered for me, but I'm still curious with respect to the guild stuff and kind of your initial vision. We talked about alliances and additional buildings and maybe card vaults and asset vaults and stuff like that. Are there still conversations happening internally around what the future of guilds can and potentially will look like? And if so, are you at liberty to share any of that?
As far as I know, there have not been a lot of internal discussions about guilds for the time being, as most of the focus has remained on things like the league system and ranked battles and improving the experience for new players. So you've seen a lot of stuff in the releases that has been geared towards that. And that continues to be a lot of the focus. And I think the fact that pretty much the entire rest of the team is working on the various aspects of the NPE, and I'm the only person on land right now, that tells you what the priorities of the company are. So there is a very large priority, a large focus on the NPE, and there is less of a focus on land. But there's a sense that we need to keep land moving forward and can't ignore it completely. And in regards to guilds, um, I think the time for guilds is coming. So that hasn't been the focus yet, but I think we're going to start shifting into that. You already see it beginning to happen with Royal Eagle's initiatives to have guilds for new players to join. So we want people to get into that guild experience. And we see that when people are part of a guild, it helps with player retention, because they have more of that social aspect and feeling that they want to help their guild mates out and whatnot. So you're starting to see more focus on the guild aspect, and that's going to naturally lead into wanting to advance the guild system. So its time is not quite here yet, but I see it coming. And when it does come, So I mentioned earlier that the land code base is designed in a very different way to the rest of Splinterlands, and that makes it very hard uh, for new people to come in and work with it. The guild system is much more straightforward and fits in a lot better with the existing Splinterlands design methodology. The guild system does not rely on all those crazy database functions that I was talking about. It is 100% written in JavaScript. It is fairly easy and straightforward to work with. So it doesn't much matter if I'm the guy working on it or if someone else is working on it. Even though I created a lot of the guild stuff, it's pretty easy for another developer to come in and pick that up and figure out what's going on with guilds. And I'm confident that anyone on the team could do that really. So when the time does come, it's not going to be necessarily so important for me to stop working on land and then suddenly start concentrating on guilds and come back to land. It's possible that could happen. It's also possible that I could keep working on land and then some of the other devs could devote themselves to guilds. Whereas with land, it's um, such a different code base that once you have someone trained up and really involved with land, like I mentioned on the downhaul, I'd spent like a couple months just getting familiar with land code and up to speed on it. So now that I've invested all that time and effort in getting into land, it makes sense for me to stay on land for at least a decent stretch of time and do as much as I can with it. Anyone else that comes in and starts working on land would have to spend the same amount of time that I did getting up to speed with it. And we've also seen that it's really hard to coordinate multiple people working on land simultaneously, also due to that code base. Like I think it was the summer before land released, Agrod was pushing really hard to get land out, and he was saying, "I want it by end of August" or something like that. And everyone on the team was suddenly put onto land, and there were a lot of missteps then. There were a lot of miscommunications, people stepping on each other's toes, one guy doing one thing, another guy doing something completely different, and it was really hard to coordinate all that activity. Um, Whereas with something like guilds, I don't think that would be so much of an issue. You could have two or three guys working on guilds and not really step on each other's toes so much. So I think the way that things are being done right now kind of makes a lot of sense. Um, and we'll see how it goes for the next few months. And then, of course, priorities always change and shift over time. So maybe 6 months down the road, things will be a little different. Maybe then the focus will be shifting to guilds. Maybe circumstances will change and we'll want to look at how we allocate internal resources differently. So nothing's locked in. Like I'm not going to say 100% I need to be on land for the next year, because we don't know how priorities are going to change as we go along. I can say with fair certainty it makes sense to be on land for at least the next few months, and then after that we'll kind of see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's what caused some contention too. I know that was my main hesitation with the proposal was the way it was worded was like, we are hiring Cryptomancer for land and it's going to cost this much and he's just doing that. It was like, whoa. I just think that that was one of those things that it's good to hear you say that that's not um written in stone.
Yeah, and that's why Matt added that little addendum to the proposal. He made that change to say that I may be working on other things too, depending on the needs of the team and not 100% land.
Yeah.
Well, Manser, last time we had you on, you had just kind of wrapped up the bulk of your development of the conflict system. Fast forward to today, we're 4 days, 5 days shy of the final airdrop. Kind of looking in the rear view, it feels like the conflict was such an awesome shift in the way that airdrops are delivered. You were talking about how excited you were to not have to be pushing the red button and getting all of these angry DMs that, hey, we passed the mark, where's my bloody airdrop? And as much as I know you enjoyed that process, I can imagine that it was, somewhat stressful to have to field those angry messages. Um, so looking back at the conflict system, is there something that you would have done differently? Do you feel like it was a massive success? Are you looking forward to, the next conflicts? Are you starting to think about what should we incorporate into future conflicts?
I'm very happy with the way conflicts went. I think it was a massive success. It was a lot of fun and fixed some of the issues we had with the old airdrop system. I mean, yeah, I still got a kick out of waking up in the morning and seeing like 100 messages saying "when button, when airdrop." It was kind of fun for me personally, but not for everybody else I know. So, yeah, conflicts went really well. Gosh, I can't believe we're only a few days away from the end of the last one. Wow, where has the time gone? You'll be happy to hear that conflicts will be making a comeback. We're starting to plan out the next major set, and I can't go into any details yet. It's under wraps, kind of a secret for now. Um, there'll be an announcement, probably soon-ish. But for now, all I can really say is we are planning the next major set, and conflicts will be a part of it. It may be slightly different to the way it was done for Rebellion, but I can't go into any details at this time.
Well, there is a town hall in the next 48 hours, so I would expect perhaps we hear something as soon as then. Are you able to maybe give us a hint at the tentative title of the next core set?
Nope, sorry, no hints. I will leave that up to Nate and Matt
What
to
what the what
reveal
does
when
it
they're ready.
rhyme with, Cryptomancer? No, just playing. Yeah, man, I feel
I'll
like the
leave you guessing on
conflicts.
that.
Say again.
I'll leave you guessing on that. Sorry.
Fair enough. We got Joey coming on in a couple of weeks, and yeah, we'll try twisting some arms again then. But for now, yeah, we'll just have to speculate blindly. Um, but yeah, the conflicts, man. I feel like as for as excited as you were for the conflict system, and to see how smooth they went, and the addition of the excitement of being able to see the card well ahead of time, and the introduction of the lore, and the melding of land with the conflict system with the airdrops. It feels like you guys really smashed conflicts out of the park. It was such a cool addition. And I would love to see. I'm glad to hear that the conflict system is going to continue moving forward. I would love to see stuff, and this is something that I've talked about previously on prior episodes, where you can kind of maybe choose an element that you are backing in a conflict, and maybe stake all of your fire monsters and fire summoners, for example, and across all of modern, in order to qualify for maybe some additional airdrops. So outside of working purely for the core set, has there been any discussion for leveraging the conflict technology for, maybe an exclusive skin, or, a cool background, or something like that, where you can like give the players a little bit of agency and the chance to kind of uh participate in a conflict without the sole focus on the core set?
There have not for the time being, but we always kind of imagine that conflicts could be used for other things like that. So I'm not going to rule it out and say never. Um, I think I've mentioned in the past that when conflicts was first designed, it originally had an even more ambitious scope. Nate's team came out with like kind of a grand design for all these different ways to kind of turn it into its own special game mode. There would have been additional stats that the cards had. There would have been a sense of like mage wagons battling mage wagons, and cards could like kind of be killed and then have to be revived later on. And there were various kind of D&D-ish kind of elements to it, I guess you could say. But we didn't have time to implement that original ambitious plan. I did do tech specs for it though, so I have the specs just kind of sitting on the shelf if we ever wanted to revisit it. But I always thought personally that if you took something like that original plan and combined it with various PvE type things, it could become an entire new game mode that ties into the land system. Um, my personal dream is to use it as kind of the basis for a questing system. Like, imagine you have to go into a location on Pretoria. Maybe you have to explore this deep, dark forest, and you have to kill all of the spider monsters that are inhabiting the forest. And you get some kind of special item or spell as a result of doing that that you can utilize. Um, and it could also tie in some way with the original vision of boss monsters, going all the way back to that Kickstarter campaign and the boss monster backers. Um, so there's a lot of things that you can do with conflicts. You can be basically the foundational stone for building up an entire new game mode. And we haven't really seen any steps into evolving it that way yet. So it will be used for the next core set, but that'll probably be more of a minor tweaking of what we have now. Eventually, I would like to do something more ambitious with it, more along the lines of Creative's initial vision. But whether or not we will actually have time for that or the resources for it, who knows? So that's more pie in the sky thinking for the time being. But someday, someday, I'm hoping we'll get there when Man 2.0 is a
Yeah.
thing. And
I would love to see conflicts as a permanent thing. Even, as I know it's not going to happen now, but as at the end of Rebellion, to maybe somehow extend it to where, it can include other cards or other editions and just
yeah,
to keep the
absolutely.
mechanism going. Yeah.
I would too. And there's no technical reason why we couldn't allow cards from other editions to be used on conflicts. It's just a decision that was made because it was initially going to be the Rebellion airdrop mechanism, and now the airdrop mechanism for the next major card set as well. But certainly you can imagine putting cards from other sets on there and getting other kinds of benefits out of it.
Well, Mancer, you mentioned the new game modes. We had Yaba uh drop his inaugural Peak D snap the other day, and I think sent some heads spinning. We speculated a little bit last week with Azurcon. Uh, the mention of Conclave, Arcana, and Hardcore mode were kind of the key buzzwords there. I think everybody automatically jumped to, Yaba is dropping hints around some new game modes. Was this something that you guys have discussed as a team, or was this as much a surprise to you as it was to the community?
Uh, it's not a discussion that I've been part of, so it was just as much a surprise to me as it was to you guys. Internally, I'm starting to see a bit of clarification about what those terms mean. I can't really tell you any specifics right now. There's lots of things that hardcore mode could mean. Someone had a cool idea in Discord the other day for a hardcore mode that's similar to ranked play, but your cards get burned if you're the loser. And that would be kind of interesting, like
Yeah, I'm
hardcore
not playing
mode
that.
on
I'm
video
not playing
games.
that.
I'm pretty sure that's not what Yabat Matt was talking about when he said hardcore, but I don't actually know exactly what he was talking about, so I'm waiting to see on that myself.
Does the term Conclave Arcana mean anything to you? I feel like it rings a bell for me, but I can't quite put my finger on from where. Maybe it's a Magic the Gathering or a D&D thing,
That
but
does mean something to me, but if I say anything more about it, you're going to start to put the dots together, and I'd rather let Matt and Nate have that privilege.
got you. Okay, cool. All right. Well, I think it's fun speculating, and it's I imagine there's going to be some town hall questions in the coming days around Conclave Arcana and hardcore mode. But it's exciting to hear that Matt is starting to think about these things, and he's always been the conservative type and never really one to throw out chum for the fish and the sharks. without something substantial to back it up. So, I think folks are probably feeling rightfully so pretty excited about the prospect of new game modes coming in sooner rather than later.
I would love to see new game modes myself. That's always something I've been a champion of as well. Um, I like to think of Splinterlands kind of like an onion, the onion analogy. It starts out simple when you first come in, and then you start to learn ranked play. That's the top layer of the onion. Then once you're familiar with that, you peel back the onion and you see the next layer. Maybe you start learning about tournaments, and you peel that back. Maybe you get into guilds and brawls, and then you find out about card training and all trading and all the various crypto tokens that are used. And it just reveals more and more complexity the more layers that you peel back. And new game modes are a fantastic way to add new layers into the ecosystem over time. And I'm all for that myself. I've always loved very complex games like Civilization. And I don't look at complexity as something to shy away from. Um, some people do. Some people might say, "Oh, the game's too complex. I just want something nice and simple." And to those people, I say, "Fine. That's why we have different game modes. You want it nice and simple? Stick with ranked play. When you're ready to venture into other territories, well, that's why we got land and other things. And I would like to see us continue to add new game modes in ways that reinforce the ecosystem as a whole. Like, I don't want to see game modes that are completely random and unrelated to Splinterland's core aspects. Like Soulkeep could have been an awesome new game mode if it had used Splinterland's characters. As it stands, I would not call that a new game mode because it's completely unrelated to the core of Splinterlands. So I want to see new game modes that relate to and expand on the core of Splinterlands.
Yeah, I think a large part of the community is right there with you on that wish.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll only help Splinterlands become a stronger project, and it will also help with longevity over the long term. Because I
Hmm.
can understand that maybe after you've been playing ranked battles for 5 years, maybe it gets a bit stale and you want to try something else. So I would like us to have a different game mode that you could then jump into that would freshen things up and keep you interested over the long term. So that's something that can really help prolong the life of the game.
Well, Cryptomancer, it's I think this speaks to the staying power and the fun factor that exists within Splinterlands. Shout out to your guildie, and if I'm not mistaken, your guild leader Matt Clark. Uh, he kind of hangs his hat on the fact that he has never botted. He's manually battled 45,000 plus times, which is just an absurd number. He's been here since the very beginning, and he continues to find joy in the game. So, just to add to that with additional game modes, yeah, it feels like an absolute no-brainer. But in the meantime, the bread and butter of the game that is ranked, it continues to be super fun despite some of these folks showing up 6 years ago and battling in excess of 40,000 plus times.
Yep, exactly. I'd say the same thing. And so it's not that we don't want to ignore ranked and not do anything with it. We want to keep it evolving. And we've seen that. So we've got the new tactics coming in. The tech modernization will allow us to do new things with the way battles play out visually, which should keep things exciting and fresh. The new card sets keep things exciting. The new abilities, new technical possibilities always coming down the line. So it's constantly evolving as we go along. And new game modes are something we can do in parallel to also add on to the game. But at the same time, I also don't want people to think, oh no, new game modes, it's going to be just like it was before, going in too many different directions. Oh no. So, yeah, there is a big cautionary note, I would say, to that. Um, I would like to think that we have learned the lessons of the past and we want to avoid overextending ourselves in the future. So I don't think new game modes are imminent. It's not something that we really have the bandwidth for right now. If we can dig ourselves out of the hole that we've been in and maybe add one or two more developers and start growing again, then I can see new game modes becoming a possibility in the future. So I really, 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 really want new game modes, but it has to be done the right way at the right time when we have the resources. That time is not now, but I do hope and anticipate that that time will come.
Manser, let's kind of start winding things down here, and I'd love to get your perspective on the future a little bit. So in a vacuum, it sounds like you're incredibly bullish. It sounds like you're super excited for what's to come. Um, the reality is a little bit different, that we're operating with a very, finite pool of resources, and we're losing about $100,000 a month, as per Matt's, kind of highlight of the financials about 10 days ago at the down hall. Um, all things considered, and I think all three of us on this episode kind of feel similarly, but I'd love to hear you kind of expand on, what keeps you invested to the degree that you are in Splinterlands. Professionally, you've obviously hitched your wagon to the Splinterlands caravan, and you're very passionate in what it is that you do for the company. And I have to expect that you wouldn't be doing that if you didn't believe that there was a future. Are you able to kind of expand on that a little bit for us, and help folks understand why it is that you are still so committed, and with such a strong degree of conviction, and yeah, set that there is a future for Splinterlands, and it's brighter than anything that's in our past.
Sure. So I still have 100% belief that we're going to get out of this and we're going to make Splinterlands great again. Not that it's not great already. We'll make it greater. Um, and I think the future looks bright for us. I don't subscribe to all the doom and gloom that some people are constantly carrying on about. Um, yeah, I don't have my head in the sand. I recognize that we're in a tight spot financially. Things are tough. That can be stressful for a lot of people, but I have a more optimistic view myself. I don't let any of that weigh me down in day-to-day activities. I always approach each day with an optimistic perspective, feeling excited and passionate and thankful to still be here and working on stuff for you guys. And I hope I will continue to be here for a good many years. I can see myself doing this until I retire someday. I don't ever want to have another job after this. This is it for me. Um, and a couple of reasons for that. Number one, I have unshakable faith in Yabatmat. He is an amazing person in so many ways. He's been the best boss to work for by far out of any company that I've ever been at. And I consider him something of a technical genius as well, the way he created the original code base and framework that the game utilized. He did an incredible job getting all of that up and running from scratch and implementing his vision. And since taking over as the CEO of the company, I think he's continued to do an incredible job managing what is a very difficult situation. He's done the best that he can do, and I think he's the guy to pull us out of it. So my faith in him is unshakable. And secondly, I believe in myself, and I believe in the rest of the team. I have a lot invested because I see the people that we have as being very capable, driven people. Everyone on the team is passionate about what they do. Anyone who wasn't passionate about it is no longer with us. Anyone who did not have the technical skills is no longer with us. The people that we have left are absolutely wonderful, amazing people. And we all work very well together. And I'm confident in our ability to push things forward from a technical point of view. And third, I think that Splinterlands is really trying to push the envelope in terms of what's possible with Web3 gaming. Um, I think it's a really unique type of game and ecosystem, and it's fascinating to work on from the perspective of it being in kind of this cutting edge crypto space. It's a very interesting technology to work with, and that also keeps me interested on a day-to-day basis. And all the dreams that I have for the future of the game, like I've mentioned some pretty pie in the sky goals, like a PvE quests for land, or expanding the conflict system, or making new game modes. These are things that I can see us getting to at some point in the future. So when I ask myself, what's going to keep me interested in this 5 or 10 years down the road? Well, my answer would be those things, those dreams for what we can really turn the game into. We have a really solid foundation to build on. And now that we have the foundation in place, we spent years working on that foundation. Now it's here. It's just about ready. The NPE is kind of like the last missing pieces that we need to slot into the puzzle. With the foundation in place and with us digging ourselves out of the hole that we've been in, hopefully within the next year or so, then I can see us going to some of these pie in the sky places over the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And that excitement about what we might possibly be able to do in the future is a big part of what drives me to get up every morning and write all the code that I write, knowing that I'm helping push us one tiny step forward towards that future. So there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. Um, I'd say set the doom and gloom aside. We're going to come out the other end of this.
Well, yeah, I have to agree there. I feel very optimistic. I know we've had a lot of hurdles and stuff, and I know there's still some things to overcome. But overall, I think the product is amazing. The game's amazing, and the past 6 years has not been by any means any waste of time or anything. That what we've managed to build in that, or what you guys have managed to build in that time, is absolutely it's amazing, and we're in a position to, if we just again just nail a couple things and get that NPE in place, and actually we can start generating revenue, and we could turn into one of the biggest games out there. I do believe that's possible.
Yep, there's a lot of potential, and I'm very excited about being a part of it. And I think our community is also going to be very excited about being a part of it. It's a fun place to be.
Beautiful. Well, Cryptomancer, the last question from me, and I'll turn it over to Jimmy to kind of round us out if he's got any lingering questions. But once we do come out of this thing, and I'm completely with both of you guys. I think the future is bright, and we're well on our way. We've seen a lot of the necessary adjustments take place the last 18 months, especially in the last 12 months since Yaba has taken over the helm. So my final question is, at what point in time are we going to be celebrating at the Cryptomancer banana plantation in Malaysia, man? When's that invite coming out to Pretoria?
We'll have to see about how all that goes. Yeah, I do have some real life land investments that I'm managing in Malaysia. Um, my wife's kind of the real life land manager. I like managing the virtual side and not getting my hands kind of dirty with the physical stuff. But my wife really likes the physical stuff. And Malaysia is great because everything is so cheap over there. You can just go around and find these fantastic deals. And we'll see what that turns into. But yeah, hopefully someday we can all be kind of relaxing together on Splinterlands Isle or Mount Splinterlands. I don't know, maybe there'll be a real life Mount Pretoria that we can develop or something. Um, yeah, that would be the retirement plan.
Sweet.
Nice. So I guess my last question would be getting back to let's go old school a little bit. I seem to recall your favorite card may have been the gelatinous cube at one point in time. Was that true?
Oh yeah, I was a
Uh,
big fan of the cube. Still am.
and oh yeah, well it's seen a massive with weapons training, the gelatinous cube has become an absolute beast of a card in certain situations there. Is that still your favorite card, or has something usurped that position for you?
Oh gosh, favorite card. There's so many good candidates for favorite card. Um, I wouldn't say cube these days. I mean, nowadays all my cubes are on land and I don't actually play with it anymore. These
You don't have
days,
one cube that's in your play deck at this point?
no, I don't. Every single cube is on land.
All
It's not
10,000 of
looking
them.
the plots. Those that I have left, I sold off a lot of them too once they went up in value. They made a nice trade. But these days, I think one of my favorites is the Dragon Summoner Akane, the one that can put ambush on units. I absolutely love that summoner. And some of the new airdrop summoners for conflicts are also really fun to play with. I really like Eternal Tofu as well. And my favorite non-summoner card has got to be Venka. He's just so awesome the way he goes in there. He's my smash card. I'm like, you, Venka, go smash that guy, do it. and he smashes them good.
Smash and then
He's,
trample
yes,
and
he's such a
smash
fun card.
again.
I use him every chance I can get.
Well, shit, Vanka is the answer to the massive gelatinous cube too,
Oh yeah,
Yep,
absolutely.
with
The
that
press.
huge
we can
oppress.
pound those
Yeah.
cubes into jelly.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you, man. I feel like the tactic summoners have been so much fun to play with, and we've heard some of the pushback around tactics maybe taken away from what land is ultimately designed to offer by way of items and spells. But um I ultimately feel like tactics was a huge win for when it came, and um I don't really see tactics taking away from what items and spells can bring in at some point in the future. I think they ultimately complement each other really, really well. And it's just been so much fun playing the tactic summoners.
Yep, I agree completely. I think tactics is kind of an exploratory proof of concept to demonstrate that we can really do what we imagine doing with items and spells. It doesn't take away from items and spells at all. Items and spells are going to add on a lot more possibilities that we can't do with tactics right now. Like for instance, you might have an item that heals your entire team, but it only triggers once during combat under certain specific conditions. Or you might have spells that can only be cast by certain cards at certain times. And there's a lot more you can do with them beyond what tactics allow. Tactics are just picking different abilities to put on different cards. That's totally not going to be what items and spells are like, I think.
Another question there, I guess, that triggers that kind of triggered the whole thought. It's being that you're working on land, being how complex land is going to be when it's done, and how much is going to be involved in the creation of these items and spells. Do you expect items and spells to be relatively common and accessible, or going to be, because of the resource intensity that seems to be involved, do you think they're going to be very expensive and harder to obtain?
That's hard to say because we don't really have an idea yet of what the economy is going to look like that far down the line,
Mhm.
or what exactly the resource requirements are going to be to finally build these things. My preference would be for them to be relatively common and accessible, but for there to be ranges of
Yeah.
scarcity.
Yeah, have some that are just
Very,
really, really rare and like, whoa, you've got one of these, whatever it might be, this special ring that gives whatever, and other things like boots of speed that give +1 to speed to a character could kind of be all over the place.
Yeah, I see it being very similar to the existing card sets. You're probably going to have your common items, which have a large print rate, and then there's probably going to be like rare, epic, legendary items. Gold foils, it'll probably be really difficult to produce those.
Hmm.
So I imagine them being somewhat similar to the way cards are organized now.
Cool.
Cool indeed. All right, Cryptomancer. Before we get you out of here, I want to turn the mic over to you. Is there any parting words of wisdom you want to share with the community before we wrap things up here?
Well, I just say that it's been a pleasure to serve you guys working on the game. Um, and it continues to be a lot of fun. I'm excited for what the future will hold. And I would say don't let the Discord rabble rousers get you down. we still see a little of that from time to time, but I try to ignore the rabble rousers as much as possible and just focus on the mission of turning out cool stuff for the game. So I think 2025 is going to be a fun year for us once we get over this NPE hump and once the marketing campaign really kicks in. I can tell you guys that just today, in fact, I saw in the internal team communications channels, I saw a new guy being welcomed aboard to start making use of those marketing funds from the Hive Fund. So I think we're going to start seeing some of those efforts ramp up, and 2025 is going to be a really good year.
Yeah, I've seen a trickle of new players too. I've jumped into Tavern and kind of lurk a little bit every once in a while, and you see there's definitely been a couple new players coming in there asking questions. It's good to see that us turning that point once again, and I hope that continues.
Yep, I've seen that as well, and it's definitely a very encouraging sign.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful. Well, down with the rabble rousers. We we love having you aboard, Cryptomancer. I think I speak on behalf of everybody that like we kind of opened the episode with. It was never a question of should we continue with keeping Cryptomancer aboard. We're happy that things have turned out the way that they are, and seeing that overwhelming support. I'm sure it's got to feel good. It's got to feel encouraging, and I think you had a really warm response in general on that downhaul. So yeah, on behalf of everybody, man, thank you for all that you do, and your passion is you wear it on your sleeve, dude, and it inspires, I think, everybody who listens to you speak about what it is that you're doing for the game and for the community and for the longevity of Pretoria. So thank you, man.
Thanks for that, and thanks for having me here. It's been great talking with both of you today. Have a good one.
Always fun.
You too, Ben.
All right, everybody. We'll appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll be back next week with another episode. In the meantime, you have been listening to
The People's Guild.